Also, we have some correspondence I'm going to read from Lori Kavanaugh that sent it to us, and I sent you copies of it. Mostly pertaining to PA 490, but North Stonington Board of Selectmen, the North Stonington, Connecticut, members of the Board of Selectmen, I respectfully submit this comment for public entry regarding the application of Public Act number 24-70 to historic to continuously operating farms within the town of North Stonington. Many Connecticut farms trace their origins to colonial land grants and early town charters dating back to the 1600s and 1700s. These lands were established, worked, and recognized by towns long before the existence of modern state agencies and centralized administrative oversight. Their legitimacy derives from continuous agricultural use, recorded deeds, and long-standing municipal recognition, not from state permission. Article 10th of the Connecticut Constitution protects home rule and preserves municipal authority over land use, agriculture, and property recognition. Any interpretation of Public Act number 24-70 that requires affirmative approval from the state executive agency for pre-existing farmland shifts authority away from the municipalities and undermines the Constitution, this constitutional framework. Public Act 490 was enacted to preserve farmland through recognition of actual agricultural use. It was not intended to impose a new approval regime on land that has been farmed for generations. Transforming recognition into permission reverses the burden of proof and converts a vested property's right into a revocable privilege. More broadly, such as interpretation sets a concerning precedent. Once the state asserts authority to approve existing farmland, it opens up the door to future denials, punitive conditions, selective enforcement, and indirect confiscation through taxation and regulatory pressures. This precedent does not stop with land classification. Conditioning agricultural recognition on state approval invites expanded regulatory reach into core farming operations, including the potential seizure or destruction of livestock, game, or poultry, and the forced vaccination or treatment of animals without practices that they further, without meaningful local oversight or due process. These outcomes represent profound intrusions into private property, livelihood, and traditional agricultural practices, and they further erode municipal authority under home rule. I respectfully urge that the Public Act number 24-70 be interpreted and, if necessary, clarified and amended to automatically grandfather historic farms, preserve municipal authority consistent with home rule, and prohibit state intervention. The proper role of the state is to support towns in protecting their agricultural heritage and family farms, not to override long-established local recognition, expose farmers to punitive enforcement, and expand centralized control over land and animals that have been stewarded locally for generations. Thank you for your consideration and preserving local authority in Connecticut's agricultural history. Respectfully submitted, Lori Hopkins Kavanaugh, 1 Pine Woods Road, North Stonington, Connecticut, on December 13th. So that's what I have for correspondence. Okay, next we're going to have our presentation. I had set some guide rules for this. They're up on, if you want to see what they are. If you didn't take one, they're up there on the counter. Lori, thank you for coming tonight. I appreciate this. As I said to you a minute ago, this board likes to listen, discuss, reflect, and decide. And sometimes that takes some time because we want to listen to everything we can listen to. But I appreciate you coming this evening. You know much more about this subject than I do, and you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to refer to the materials that are passed out, and I greatly appreciate the town doing that because those materials are not what I'm going to regurgitate tonight. So please take a copy of everything up there because it's the law. It is provides a lot of substantiation to what I'm going to say, but I just don't want to repeat myself, and this is a very complex and it appears somewhat controversial issue right now. I just want to say thank you to the Board of Selectmen for inviting me to speak on this important topic. My name is Lori Hopkins Kavanaugh. I'm a resident and property owner in North Stonington and the founder of Connecticut Law Initiative. I established this organization to promote constitutional compliance across Connecticut's governing institutions, non-governmental organizations, and trade associations. Most people do not realize, although some in this room will know now, that law, L-A-W, is an acronym, and it stands for land, air, and water. And those are the foundational principles of natural law reflected in Genesis in our constitutions. I'm a former congressional candidate in the 64 towns of Connecticut's 2nd Congressional District. Not running for anything, I'm proudly unaffiliated with any political party, and the views I express today are derived directly from those experiences, having lived and worked for the majority of my life in the urban centers of New London. I wasn't raised a farmer, and for 4 years in Norwich, as well as from decades of working across diverse communities throughout this district. I'm also a licensed real estate broker and a former federal housing and urban development HUD contractor. I serve communities across New London, Wyndham, Middlesex, and Tolland counties through the foreclosure crisis, and it was horrific, actually. Prior to my retirement, my client base consisted primarily of first-time homebuyers, with approximately 65% of my clients being minorities. Through that work, I gained extensive firsthand experience being employed by the working poor households. And I understand how housing policy affects real people on the ground. My husband and I purchased the horse rescue on Pine Woods Road, and I have spent the past 3 years with him protecting that land from development, even though I'm a developer. While renovating and restoring our 1830s farmhouse, a property that was considered a tear down by, I think, just about everybody. The town we chose to retire in, North Stonington, has now been overtaken by state and regional governance, and our land has been subjugated to decision-making by unelected corporatist entities operating outside meaningful local accountability. That can't stand. It really places a wrench in our plans for retirement. So the Connecticut Law Initiative, which didn't originally tackle this issue but has embraced it, invokes constitutional law, not merely statutory law, because the Constitution of the state of Connecticut and the Constitution of the United States are the supreme law. Statutes, regulations, and administrative actions, which you all deal with, they only derive their legitimacy insofar as they comply with the constitutions. I hope you all realize that is a legal fact. Nothing legitimate about HB 8002 going off the script is legitimate unless it is under the constitutions and it complies with those things. So I'm here today because legislation such as House Bill 8002, along with recent changes to the farmland, which I greatly appreciate you reading that information because that's equally important and not getting any attention across the state right now. But we are so fortunate in North Stonington that our first selectman really is in touch with farmers and understands how this is affecting us. I'm here because this legislation truly does change farmland and land use laws. It directly undermines local governance, our selectmen, threatens municipal home rule, which is part of our laws, and represents the most urgent and sweeping consolidation of land use power in the history of this state, placing lawful decision-making in North Stonington at immediate risk. This issue is not partisan, it is structural. It concerns who governs our town, the people closest to the land or centralized authorities who are unelected, corporatist, and accountable primarily to profit rather than the people they govern. Why this matters? Well, this is not a hypothetical concern. The changes enacted through this House bill and related land use and farmland legislation are already in effect. I can cite several across the state that I heard about today, and reshaping how decisions are made in Connecticut towns, usurping local zoning. It's happening instantaneously. It's been planned for a while, and that's what's happening. So for the first time in our state's history, core land use authority is being removed from municipalities and transferred to regional and administrative bodies that are not locally elected and not directly accountable to the residents who bear the consequences of their decisions. As a former federal HUD contractor, I want to be very clear. Housing policy does not fail because towns resist it. It fails when policy is imposed without regard to infrastructure, environmental capacity, or the people who actually live in the community, which is what this bill does. Home rule in Article 10, the constitutional firewall. This is our little toolkit of laws that protect us in the town of North Stonington. Article 10th of the Connecticut Constitution exists for this exact moment, for today. Home rule is not a courtesy granted by the legislature. It is not. It is the constitutional firewall designed to prevent centralized authority from overriding local judgment, local knowledge, and local accountability. Municipal powers are to be liberally construed in favor of the town, our Constitution. Once land use authority is removed from a municipality, every other local decision becomes advisory at best. No more teeth. House Bill 8002 crosses the constitutional line. It does not merely encourage housing, it compels compliance with regional planning schemes that override local zoning authority, environmental safeguards, and municipal discretion. I'm an expert on eminent domain from New London. I know the Supreme Court, Kelo versus the City of New London, like the back of my hands. When land use authority is centralized, farmland and open space are no longer treated as assets to be preserved. They are treated as inventory, land banks to be reassigned when state priorities change. Statutory protections, including in perpetuity clauses, that language does not bind the legislature. Once zoning authority is removed from towns, those protections become conditional and vulnerable. Eminent domain is no longer, it would no longer require overt seizure. It occurs automatically through regulatory pressure, forced rezoning, and economic infeasibility. North Stonington, maybe the most important statement, is not an interchangeable planning unit. We rely on private wells and septic systems. Our aquifers recharge slowly. My entire family can tell you our aquifers recharge slowly. Our roads, emergency services, and infrastructure are scaled for a rural population. These are not policy preferences, they are physical facts. Once groundwater is depleted or contaminated, no statute can reverse it. Environmental collapse does not announce itself in advance. This concern that I have is heightened by statewide initiatives advanced by the Lamont administration, promoting water-intensive data centers and large-scale energy projects that place unprecedented strain on local water supplies. These facilities require enormous and continuous water consumption for cooling, while also driving the installation of acres upon acres upon acres of industrial solar arrays that permanently alter open space, fragment farmland, and disrupt ecosystems under the banner of climate policy. These projects are often justified through alignment with the United Nations climate initiatives and international sustainability frameworks that are not accountable to the people in this room or in Connecticut. The manufacturing supply chains and economic benefits of these programs disproportionately advantage foreign interests, while the environmental costs, land costs, and water depletion are borne locally. North Stonington did not consent to become a resource colony for regional, state, or global agendas. Local land, water, and environmental stewardship decisions must remain under local control, where consequences are livable and irreversible. It must also be stated for the record that much of the regional planning now influencing land use decisions in Connecticut is being driven through organizations such as Diversify Connecticut. While presented as an equity-based planning, these programs raise serious constitutional and civil rights concerns. United States Supreme Court precedents on disparate impact prohibits government action that intentionally or functionally or financially sorts populations by race, even when framed as policy objectives. It's against the law and is unconstitutional. Public funds are being directed to target, steer, and redistribute minority populations in a sanctuary state into specific geographic areas through housing and zoning policy, rather than allowing organic, voluntary settlement driven by individual choice. The communities most affected are towns like North Stonington, where families and Native Americans for generations untold have farmed, stewarded, and inhabited these lands. Replacing one population by policy mandate is not lawful planning. It is social engineering, and it conflicts directly with constitutional protections, civil rights jurisprudence, and municipal home rule. The question before this body is not whether these policies exist. It is how North Stonington chooses to reply. I am suggesting, one, we place formal objections into the record, formally object to House Bill 8002, because it conflicts with Article 10th of the Connecticut Constitution and undermines municipal home rule. Appoint a charter exploratory commission. The Board of Selectmen may appoint a charter exploratory commission to investigate and report to the residents of North Stonington how best to strengthen and protect the town's home rule authority. I'm respectfully requesting to serve on that commission to assist in evaluating charter options. I identify constitutionally compliant law firms to support the charter process and recommend lawful mechanisms to establish a durable firewall against state overreach through proper assertion of local powers. I believe North Stonington needs to adopt a home rule resolution. I gave a copy of one suggested. It can be changed to reaffirm local zoning authority and constitutional limits on delegating planning power, that we require constitutional review before compliance, condition implementation of state or regional mandates on constitutional review prior to compliance or the expenditure of public funds, that we protect our farmland, water, and infrastructure, and strengthen ordinances grounded explicitly in home rule and local public health authority, that we demand transparency, which is 8002. We're not even allowed to petition or complain. Whatever they're going to do to us, you have no choice. We need full transparency from regional bodies and third-party organizations influencing planning, including funding sources, decision-making authority, and legal jurisdiction. There's a large money pot that's involved in this. We have seen across the country a lot of corruption happening involving these nonprofit organizations that get involved with this quasi-public distribution of money for whatever they're planning. But in closing, North Stonington must insist that progress remain lawful, accountable, and rooted in this community that has stewarded this land for generations. Once land use authority is lost, it's not going to return. That is why this moment matters and why silence is consent. And thank you all for your time, for listening. That comprises the entire presentation.
Laura, you hit the note right on the nose. I told you 15 to 20. Perfect timing on your part. So thank you.